As you saw by the title of today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the two ways to enlightenment. The long way round, the Western way, and the inner shortcut, the Eastern way. This is, I'm going to be taking this from an essay that I wrote some years ago now. It's a long essay, but I'll summarize it for you. I'll read bits and pieces. I'll leave the link to the essay like I always do in the comments or in the body of the description of the video. So what I mean by two ways of enlightenment. Well, the one that we know most in our Western culture is the one of the way of education. You know, the way of the masculine mind, of the rational mind. This is the long way round. Why is it the long way round? Because in this tradition you remember facts, you remember quotes, you collect books and gurus and scriptures and religion, and you are beating yourself over the head with the scripture until something happens. And what usually happens is when you have collected enough information, you make a deduction that that's what this really means, that all of this leads you to this conclusion. But now, even then, when you have collected all these information, all these facts, which sometimes takes years, decades, and even lifetimes, it's not so much the rational mind that has revealed to you the connection, the conclusion to what you were seeking, to what you were looking for. It is always actually intuition that finally makes connections between the little bits and pieces, all that information you've collected over the decades, over the lifetimes, and suddenly makes sense, and you go bang, and you get it. That's the shortcut. So you can go the long way round, the Western way, or you can go what's called the Eastern shortcut, the inner way. And the inner way is the way of intuition. So I'll read you some of that essay. It's a long essay, so I won't read the whole thing. And I will read you a story Joseph Campbell used to say. He used to share this story in his talks. So you might be familiar with it. But this is the essay. Two ways to enlightenment. There are two ways to enlightenment. First and obvious is through instruction, school, teacher and books or ashram, guru and guidelines, spiritual exercises, the way of religion. Yeah, this is the well-marked way of masculine mind, the way of the head. I was just telling you about that. And there is the direct way, the feminine way of the intuitive heart, the unmarked way to enlightenment, without a mediator, that is to say, no one above you, necessary to import the message. For like a flower that doesn't need instructions on how to bloom, but does it spontaneously, unfolds directly from within itself, it comes as a direct and instant revelation from within your soul. Yeah? What Buddha calls the true Dharma eye, the inner eye of transcendence, a vision, dream at night, or intuitive revelation during the day. Yeah, we've talked about this many times. This is this is the way of the saint, the poet, the mystic, and some gifted shamans. Now I'm gonna have to make a correction with the saint. The saint usually, always, has a revelation, but the revelation has to be within the approved narrative of the scripture. The saint will not have a revelation which is outside of that, because the church will never approve that. So the only way that the saint, his or her revelation is approved is if that revelation sticks within the approved scripture, the narrative of the church's the scripture. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this, I'm going to share this story about the Eastern way. I've talked about before about the Buddha and his flower sermon. You can read the essay. Like I said, I'll put a link to it in your own time and quietly. And I don't go into detail about the flower sermon, Buddha's flower sermon. But all he did is, he had a sermon. He collected all his disciples. They were all sitting around him, and all Buddha did was lifted a flower. And only one of these disciples got the message. The rest needed a lecture. And what is a flower? Flower just grows, like I said, by itself. It doesn't need instructions. It just unfolds, it blooms from within itself. That's the message. And there I go into examples from the Elysian mysteries, where a stalk of grain was shown during the mysteries. There's the mystery as well. Life unfolds from within itself. It doesn't need instructions. Okay. So, but I'll share with you a story. Like I said, Joseph Campbell was fond of sharing this story. Not very often, but sometimes. And so this is the story. This is what I say in the essay. This is after I've talked about the Buddha. Another fantastic story that nicely illustrates the difference between mediated illumination of religion and direct and instant illumination from the soul is the ancient legend of Hu Neng. Yeah, he was an illiterate woodchopper. Yeah, I was an illiterate woodchopper my whole life, really. I didn't belong anywhere. And at school, I was terrible at school. That's another story. Anyway, here we go. So he was standing one day at the door of a private home, waiting for an order, when he overheard someone inside intoning the verses of the Heart Sutra. All is emptiness, is what he heard. The very form is emptiness, no clouds, no word. And immediately illuminated, he got it. He went, all is emptiness. In other words, he got out of his own way. Empty, be empty and see what happens. Be empty of any preconditions, any programming, any tradition that have been laid over you since you were born. Because since you were born, a tradition has been laid over your consciousness. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do and now even more, TV, politicians, they have their own agenda, and they're laying all these things, these layers of things that's important to them, their own agenda on top of you, especially if you're listening to TV. Okay, so he got rid of all that. This is what we call getting rid of the ego. And suddenly, bang, he got it. Because there was nothing to block the revelation that was coming to him. So the story continues. So then he goes to a monastery, leaving his mother and all behind. Well, he can't even read Chinese, let alone Sanskrit, so he's put to work in the kitchen. That's my whole life story there. The young monks are under the discipline of an abbot, and the abbot is getting old. It is time for him to retire. And so he sets up a little contest. Anyone who can write 4 verses summing up Buddhism and give the most elucidating exposition of Buddhism will be the next abbot. Okay? So there was the young man in the monastery that everybody knew was going to be the great one. And he wrote on the wall. So this is a separate guy. This was the best student, if you like. So this is what he wrote on the wall. The body is the tree of illumination. The mind is mirror bright. The mind is a mirror through which illumination is achieved. Always keep it dusted clean, lest dust on it alight. Hu Neng comes out from the kitchen and asks his friends to read him that. And any friends reads it and he says, now write this. So these friends translated it to the kitchen hand, and this is what he says. Now write this in response write this on the wall. The body is not the body tree, the mind no mirror bright, since nothing is there, on what should dust alight? Exactly. There's nothing there. He's empty. He's ready to receive all the information. Don't worry about any instructions. See what happens. Okay. Well, this is really one step closer to the ultimate doctrine. When the abbot came down the next morning, all the monks were jabbering. No one knew who had written that on the wall. And the abbot pretended to be very angry, and he took the slipper and wiped it off. I'll tell you in a minute why. The young monks went through the day. Then that evening the abbot calls Huneng to him and says, "Come here. Here are the robes of the office. Here is the begging bowl of the patriarch. Go away." So he was right. The kitchen hand was right. There's nothing there. So on what should the dust alight? But the abbot, he doesn't need this kind of revelation, this kind of direct revelation, because the monks are not ready. The ones that are studying, the people that are studying, the people that are, I found that in my experience as well, the people that are studying, collecting books and quoting quotes and have the, what should we call it? Not the doctrine, I was just thinking, the theory, I'm thinking here of Jungians, the theory, in the little thumb, the direct experience just does not happen, because all that is in the way, nothing happens. So these people are not ready for direct experiences. There's too much. The heads are cluttered too much with studies, with books, with scriptures, and with remembering things to be able to receive anything directly. So the abbot sees that this guy, he's gonna cause trouble in the monastery. All these monks are not ready for direct experience. They only know what the society's narrative is to study and to remember things. So can you imagine if someone comes along and just says, "No, don't worry about that, all that is wrong"? The whole business of the monastery falls apart. It's not necessary. So he tells them, "Go away, there's you won the contest, there's your robes of office, there's your begging bowl, now, get lost, because you're going to cause trouble." Okay. So we go a little further. One of Jungian's favorite saying was, "Look within, the secret is inside you." Exactly. So I'll continue with the essay a little more, but this is this is the story that I wanted to show you, the differences between the two modes of enlightenment. Really the rational, the collecting of the education way, it's not really enlightenment. It's what it is. It collects information until you think you have enough proof that you can make a conclusion. But usually what I found is with people that even then they just don't believe that this is enough proof. They continue one example after another, another book, another guru. It just layers on like a layer cake, and it eventually it might dawn on them, by deduction. That's why the rational mind, the sciences that we have are called deductive sciences, because finally by deduction they might think, "Oh yes, something is actually happening. I actually got the message. That this, I've come up to the conclusion that all the research that I've done, all the information that I've collected, this is what it means." But they've never had a direct experience. But like I said at the beginning, even then, when you have finally collected all that information, you got volumes and volumes and volumes of information. Some people have libraries of information. And what actually in the end finally convinces them to conclude that this is what that means is connections between this and this information, this bit of information, this bit of information, so that it creates a whole within which the answer lies. The answer is collected, from all these connections. But the connections are not made by the rational mind. The rational mind doesn't know how to make connection. The rational mind knows how to put things into its its right place, its right, this belongs to this section, this belongs to this section. It does not make connections. But the conclusions, usually when you read people's scientific papers, at the end of the conclusions, they made the conclusion. And it's not, conclusion is not made by the rational mind, but by intuition. And intuition is the feminine. Okay, that's your intuitive mind. So we've got a little bit more time now. I'll keep on reading the essay. Okay. There are also well-known stories of Buddha and Jesus. When the Buddha didn't find what he was looking for amongst the sages of the grove, he left to seek for himself, and having come to the Bodhi tree, finding the still point, he had to pass the first test of the ego. Desire for more of this world and fear of death, after which he had his very own illumination of this and of all eternal source. So what I'm talking about here is, Buddha also didn't find what he was looking for in the narrative of his time, in all the sages, in all the gurus in the forest. If you remember, if you're familiar with Buddha's story, and he left. First he tried this guru, then he tried that, and then he tried he tried to starve himself to death to get the illumination, and it didn't happen. So finally he realizes, actually there's a story that when he was sitting, he remembered what his father used to say about the strings of a guitar, of an instrument, that if the string is too tight, it's not going to sound right. If the string is too slack, it's not going to sound right. It has to be just right for the right tone. And in that moment of revelation, he left the grove and the gurus, and a girl came up and fed him with some rice. That's the first image of the feminine. And then when he decided that he's going to make the decision by putting the empty bowl into the stream and following where the stream is flowing, and the bowl flew up the stream, and he followed the bowl to the Bodhi stream, to the Bodhi tree, to the tree of life, to the center, and that's where he had his illumination. So you have the feminine coming to his rescue first by feeding him, and then feminine again, intuition coming to his rescue by following the stream to its source, to the center, to the tree of life. And there he had his illumination when he finally, his will was stronger than the instincts of survival. He was tempted by God Mara, by the monster Mara, in three things, and the three things were lust, duty, and fear of death. I don't remember the third one. For Buddha, the last was, sex was very important because he loved his wife. There are stories that he was always engaged. They were always, united. They were always loving and love making. And then duty, because duty was, he was a prince, so he had a duty to his people, and that's difficult to let go. So he had to let go of all these things. And once he let go of these things, Mara disappeared. His inner eye opened, and that's when he had his revelation of his life beyond lives, and in the interconnection of all of existence. And the interconnection of all of existence is your intuition. Intuition can only see interconnections. The masculine mind can't. Okay? And I go a little more here into Jesus. Similarly, Jesus went to John the Baptist, and after baptism went past him, the best teacher of the time, to the desert, and as Buddha above, passing the test, had his own revelation, after which he taught, I and the Father are one. Yeah, Jesus too didn't find what he was looking for, the best spiritual teachers of the time. He went past John the Baptist, he crossed the river, he went into his own mystic experiences in the desert. And like the Buddha, he also had 3 tests by the demon of the survival instincts, and he passed those, passed the test In the Bible it says it's the test by the devil. But the devil is simply another way of saying your survival instincts of hoarding, sex, and power. You know, that these are the three instincts, and the chakra yoga goes into it, where your first three chakras are, your hoarding, your reproduction, and your power, and then your fourth one is your heart, and that's where your life changes and becomes one of service to the community rather than just being service to yourself. Okay, my camera is just having maybe just under a minute. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. The two ways of enlightenment. There's only one way of enlightenment, but the two: the long way, the Western way of the rational mind, and the inner shortcut, the Eastern way. The Eastern way of the inner way, of where the revelation happens to you, like the woodcutter, like the kitchen hand. He got out of his own way, bang, and then he got it. And then he had to be thrown out of the monastery because all the other monks are not ready for that kind of direct experience. They still have to collect facts. All right, that's all I wanted to talk to you about today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.